Vince, welcome to the show.
Hello there. Thank you for having me.
As I was saying before the call, your LinkedIn is absolutely jam-packed, and there's no way that I could do it any kind of justice by myself. I had no idea how to introduce you. So maybe for the people at home, could you introduce yourself, what you do, and the last 49 years of experience in your career?
Oh, right. Okay. Well, how long have we got now? We got about we probably about a day. So in just a few minutes. Chemical engineer, my background. 30 odd years in industry, mainly energy sector, and then I had a few career changes. I worked in education. I worked in executive recruitment, and then the last 7 or 8 years, I have worked in a portfolio career, which combines academia, so working at my old university part time, supporting the students to get jobs and internships. Um, Also supporting MBA students and alums at various business schools in terms of mentoring. I mentor and sponsor quite a lot of people at the moment, mainly STEM, but also other areas. And then I'm on a few boards, which are important to me around education, around diversity and inclusion, around the energy transition, etc. So very briefly, that's me, and I'm sure we'll get into a few of the topics that will allow me to perhaps say a little bit more.
Of course, yeah. So, starting off with all the advice that you give to young engineers or young people in STEM, what are the biggest mistakes that you see in the first 5 years, let's say, of someone's career?
There's a number of things that come to mind, Ben, on that, and I think perhaps whether it's in order that they come in. The first one I think is that when students graduate and get a job, they over worry what that first job is because there's a feeling almost that I must get it right at the first job, otherwise that'll decide my future for the rest of my career, 30, 40 years or whatever. The reality is very different. I reckon based on all the students and graduates that I work with, and I can tell you there's several thousand there, that probably at least 50% of them change in the first 3 to 4 years of their
Wow,
career.
wow.
And those changes can be quite dramatic. For example, I've had some students who've gone, for example, working in the drinks industry, whiskey distillery to energy consultancy.
Oh,
I've got others who've gone from food to nuclear. I've got others who've gone the other way around. Loads of them. I could give you loads of examples. And I think mainly, I think graduates particularly are very marketable in those first few years. So actually, I think the most important first thing about getting a job is getting a job. It's getting in and doing stuff, and then whether it's a graduate scheme, whether it's hiring for a particular role or whatever, you then have a period of time to assess whether that's the right thing for you. Of course, you also, if you're keen on continuing as an engineer, you want to get chartered, and maybe you might then decide after chartership to do something different. And just to give you my example, in the days when I suspect when I started, people tended to stay where they were. Uh, I moved company 3 times in my first 6 years. And I
wow.
went in 3 different sectors. The first one was textiles and chemicals. The second one was fast moving consumer goods. And the third one was energy. The energy company was ExxonMobil. I stayed there 15 or so years before we were spun off into a joint venture. So I am living proof, if you like, that people can change. But in any case, don't over worry the first job. So that's the first thing I'd say. I think the second thing I would say is the relationship with the line manager is critical, and sometimes many graduates don't realize how important that is. It's so important that I tell my students if they've got a job is to get in touch with the person who's going to be your line manager several months before you even start. So if they've got a job already decided at the end of their first term, the first term of their last year, get in touch with them and start building a relationship with them, such that when you do get in there, you almost can pick up very easily. The reason why that relationship with the line manager is so important is because at least in your early years, the line manager is your only senior management position that leads into what's happening in the company. And there's no doubt at all in my mind that a good line manager can really help you in your career, develop your career, and help develop many aspects of understanding what the culture is in the company, etc. So I think that's the second point I would make is develop the relationships with your line manager because they are absolutely critical. Um, I think the third thing that maybe graduates don't do in the first few years is network.
Mm.
Um, I, I didn't know what networking was. I think when I started many years ago, getting on with people, it's probably what we called it then. Didn't call it networking. But I think it's important when you actually start in an organization to network with people across as broad a spectrum as you can. And the reason for that is that sometimes you go into a graduate scheme, and then after that graduate scheme, you then are put into a full-time position, which you may or may not have had the chance to decide. But the more you network with people across the spectrum of the company, the more you understand the roles, and actually that may then decide you what you want to do after your graduate scheme or whatever. So I think that's the third thing I would say is the power of networking, and not only, of course, about future roles, but also those people may be important to you later on in terms of advocating for you, sponsoring you in your career
Mm.
later on.
Got
So
you.
again, I think that's important. And by the way, the other thing I'd say about networking is don't just do it internally, but keep the external network growing.
Mm.
The other thing that I would say that probably employers don't want me to say is every year I would be looking at what other opportunities there are outside of my existing company. And
Okay.
that's not necessarily because you're unhappy where you are and you want to leave. It's because the job market is changing so quickly, and you actually, it may be good for you to understand what's happening out there. And one of the ways to do that is to look at selectively what might be happening outside. So those are a few of the things that I would probably throw out, Ben, just for discussion.
Bro, bro. So following up on a few of them, because there's some nuggets in there really. The first one that you said was that people over worry about that first job, don't they?
Yeah.
How common do you see that? Do you see that kind of across the board, or is that kind of like 50-50? Is that kind of, yeah, what are your
Uh,
thoughts?
I'd say I would say it's pretty common. So let
Mm,
me give you an example from Nottingham, and I think other universities will be quite similar in lots of ways. Um, people get graduate jobs through several different ways. One of the first ways they get it, of course, is they've done a year in industry placement or an internship at a company, and
mm,
that company has offered them a graduate job when they finish. Depending on you like them, they like you, sounds a good idea, you might take it, right? Okay. And
mm,
that might make a lot of sense because you spent a year with them, or 3 months if it was a summer internship. Um, and that would be a good start in your career. But that doesn't mean you're going to stay with them, of course,
mm,
because having a graduate job is quite can be quite different from an internship or year in industry, because then you're trying you know you're sort of coming back from it, whereas the graduate you're not. So that is one way, and but that can still open doors outside. I think the second way, of course, is actually applying for jobs. And the issue when you apply for jobs is you go through several interviews, you might go through an assessment center, and you sort of think you understand what the company's like. You try and do as much due diligence as you can, but the reality is you don't know what it's like to work in a company until you're actually in there. So the ones who get a job through applying and maybe haven't worked there before might then be surprised that the culture is not as good or maybe even better than they thought. And very
mm,
often, of course, you judge a culture by the people who interview you. If you get on great with them, oh, that must be a great company. I really got on well with the interviewer, etc. But of course, that person may not reflect the rest of the organization. So I think there's lots of different things that come into mind when you get a job. Coming back to that line manager thing, by the way, um, they often say that a good line manager can paper over the cracks of a bad company. A bad line manager can unfortunately turn your head against a good company because
Mm,
because because if your only interaction is with somebody who is terrible, then no matter how good the company is, you think you haven't got a career there. So I think,
mm,
and maybe that's where networking comes in anyway. So I
mm.
think I would say my experience is, yeah, probably half the students would change in the first few years, and the reasons can be many, but very often it can be down to culture, line manager.
Got
And
you.
and there's nothing to be ashamed about moving company. As I say, I moved several times in my first few years. In fact, I looked over my 49-year career. I've moved 12 times. So that says
Wow.
about every 4 years. And generally, it was a move to either something that was a better career, prospects, uh, or change of direction, which I wanted at the time. So yeah, I come back to it. I think it's totally natural. The only thing I would say is that when you do change, if you do move, you need to have some good reasons for that next company why you're moving. So just make sure you got
Mm,
your story right.
interesting. Okay. So, off the back of your comment on networking, I've already praised you on your extensive and impressive LinkedIn account. Um, if we could dig into some tactics there, or any kind of strategies you could give, or just any advice really on people who want to leverage LinkedIn as kind of a networking tool, um, how would you do that practically? What does that kind of look like to you, and what advice would you give to graduates, let's say?
By the way, I'd be very happy. I've written a paper on this. I'd be very happy to send you it if you want to
Please, yeah, yes,
send
please.
your viewers it. That would be no problem. So networking can be through many different routes, of course. I mean, it can be just meeting somebody and you have a conversation. It leads to something that could happen at a conference. It could happen on a online call. It could happen anyway. LinkedIn is a very good way of doing it because there are many different ways that you can use LinkedIn to support you. So, for example, let's say I was interested in working for BP, just to pick an example, and I might try various routes. I might try alums, I might try friends, etc. So what I do is, of course, is I can use LinkedIn, the search box. I can put in BP,
Hmm.
and then I can click on people, and then there'll be a whole bunch of people who are first degree who I can reach out to. That's one obvious route. If you don't know anyone, very often it's the case you're interested in an organization, you don't know anyone, then you can, in the search box, you could even put something like comma Nottingham University if you're from Nottingham or whatever university. So you could put a university in there, or you could put chemical engineering in there or whatever, and then you would come up with a whole bunch of other names, and then it's a case of reaching out to them. So um, oh, I'm particularly interested in hearing more about your organization. I noticed that you were a an alum from blah blah blah, or your background is chemical engineering, blah, etc. Can we have a conversation?
Hmm.
So that then leads to hopefully a conversation, probably online. If you can meet in person, even better. And then the key for me about networking is not just that initial relationship with that person. What a lot of people forget is they connect with somebody, they have one conversation, and then that's it. But that's not what it is. Networking is more than that. Networking is, I've had a conversation with you. Perhaps we can talk again in 3 months, 6 months' time about this, that, and the other. Oh, and by the way, do you know what other people in the organization do you think it would be good for me to connect to? And that's the whole point. I call it the filling the jigsaw. It's a jigsaw puzzle. Right. And the key to a jigsaw puzzle, and I haven't done one for a while, by the way, is you get key pieces that you build around. That's what
Hmm.
networking is. You
Got
find a
you.
key piece, an alarm, a friend, or somebody, and they help you find these other people. And that builds the
Hmm.
jigsaw puzzle of networking. So I think for me, the keys there are having the courage to contact people on the basis that if you contact 10 people, eight will probably ignore you, right? So you've got to be fairly thick-skinned about it. And the second thing is, it's not just a one-off conversation. It's more than that in terms of both the relationship with the person that you reached out to, but also other people they can bring you in touch with. So that's probably
Well,
how I would use LinkedIn. And I think a lot of my students that I work with are good at that. Some find it difficult because it's perhaps a little bit out of their comfort zone. But frankly, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And
mm,
I
mm.
look if you'd spoken to me 40 odd years ago, I'd have been probably terrible at it. Of course, we didn't have LinkedIn then, but I networking was not something that I would even have thought about.
Mm.
But it's key.
It's key. Yeah, build the relationships, and the relationships, the jigsaw pieces that build the career that you want, I guess.
Correct.
So moving a little bit to something called work-life balance. It's a buzz phrase, isn't it, that we hear all the
Mm.
time. What are your honest opinions about work-life balance when it comes to your career?
Uh, I'm a terrible person for work-life balance. And my parents aren't around anymore, but I reckon I got my work ethic from them. And my work ethic is very much one I spend a lot of time on my work, and
Mm,
I've always been a hard worker. So I probably am not the best person in the world to give a judgment, but I will give you my thoughts on it. I think work-life
mm,
balance is very important. I get more of it
mm,
now because I'm in a portfolio and I'm not at the stage of, one company traveling everywhere in the world, which I was in my career before. So I do get more chance for having a life outside. And of course, in my early career, like a lot of graduates, it may be that they don't have family circumstances which may cause them to have more of a balance anyway. And you might argue that the early career, if you're gonna travel around, work long hours, you might as well do it in your early years before you've even got that coming up. I talk a lot about work-life balance to our students, and particularly those who say that they want to go into finance or some of the top end consultancies. And I've met many people in my mentoring who we talk about, oh, well, I'm looking for a change. I'm looking for more work-life balance. And I want to go into investment banking. I said, well, do you realize that you will not have any work-life balance? I mean, I've been into the offices of Goldman Sachs and others, and it's almost you almost feel like there's an area where you can bring your sleeping bag in, and they've got gym and restaurant and everything, and you could be there all the time. But actually, that's fine. I thought that says again, you need to understand of stresses and issues in the workplace, and you need to find a way of overcoming them. And actually, there are some people who are very good at managing that. So, they end up, I don't know, spending an hour in the gym before they go into work. They work, and then they have time for socializing and st stressing down, if you like, in the evening, and they're up and running the next day. So I think there's a lot of people who are able to do that quite a lot, get caught on a treadmill where they don't
mm,
do it, and unfortunately, that can burn them out.
mm,
I
mm,
had a career uh, where I was working pretty long hours and I was traveling a lot. So there are some sacrifices in life, and the sacrifice I had was not seeing my family very often. Not everybody wants to do that. I decided on international. I remember sitting down with my wife actually and saying, "We've got two careers here. She was a dentist. We probably can't manage them both full time with children coming." So we sat down and we sort of agreed that probably she was happy to go part time because she could as a dentist. We moved closer to her parents to have support for the children, and I spent 80% of the time on the road.
mm,
So I think work-life balance is important. I think you need to be talking to the right people to ensure that you've got the right balance. But you've also got to bear in mind that working in organizations very often is not a 9 to 5 job. Very
mm,
often it is well, we need you to stay late. I think organizations have got better at this because there's a recognition if we want to have a more diverse workforce, i.e., more women and those from underrepresented groups, then companies need to be more. me to be better at managing their workforce. Historically, it would have been built just for men, frankly, and the expectation was, well, we're asking you to move to the States. We know you're married. We prefer you being married, by the way. They don't like to move you if you're single because they think married you're more stable.
Mm,
But equally, our expectation is that your wife will come over, and not only that, she'll give up a job.
mm,
So that was something that I faced in my early career. I actually thought it was a great job. So actually, I challenged the company and said, I want the job, but we're not going to move here. I'm happy to commute. And they agreed,
wow.
which was interesting, which was the right decision because we'd have ended up being worse off if my wife had moved over. She couldn't have worked there. And
Mm,
secondly, she'd have been unhappy. And that
mm,
would have been terrible. So sometimes you have to challenge companies. I think now they're probably a bit fairer about this sort of thing, or maybe we can find a compromise and this, that, and the other. But work-life balance is very important because at the end of the day, your working career is important. It's of a particular length, but it doesn't dictate your life. And in fact, what you do outside sometimes can make you a better person in work. So
mm,
I think work-life balance is important, and I think it's an important thing to consider when you get a job or when you move job. That doesn't preclude you going into work environments that are very long hours and this, that, and the other, but it might make you think about whether that's the right move at the right time.
yeah. Well, that's a brilliant answer. Thank you. You mentioned going to the gym an hour before work. Now, I've noticed on your LinkedIn now, I've got it up here, you like to deadlift.
Yes,
And you,
I do. That's because
how
I'm
long have,
mad. But anyway,
how, how long have you been doing that?
well, in my early career, I played a lot of football, amateur football.
Oh,
So
okay.
I did have a relaxation. I mean, it wasn't a particularly high level, but I
Yeah.
used to play for a local amateur team when I got my first job in Coventry, funnily enough, and I enjoyed football until I tore my ankle ligaments for the second time. So that stopped me playing reasonable football. When I had my traveling career, I tried to find a hotel that had some sort of fitness facility, which often ended up being a rowing machine or a cycle. So I used to use
Mm,
that. We didn't really have gyms when I was in my youth, not so many anyway. And then it's only in the last few years that I've been able to spend more time actually doing that. And for me, it's my relaxation. I enjoy going in there and doing it. And I think the other thing, not only is it about being fit and trying to stay as healthy as you can, but it's also, I think in any career, particularly one where you have a lot of travel, but also a lot of responsibilities, I think trying to stay as fit as you can is very important. I really
mm,
believe that. All the travel I did, I probably wouldn't have been able to do if I hadn't been reasonably fit because
okay.
I worked out in my career, I've been on 3,000 flights. That's a lot of flights. It's a lot
Wow.
of airports. That's a lot of countries
Yeah.
visited. That's a lot of walking on escalators and you name it. So I'm very lucky now, I suppose, in my portfolio time that I can spend more time in there and have a bit more flexibility about when I can go.
Mm,
So today I've got stuff on, a lot of it this morning, and I might go this afternoon, for example. So I think it's important, and
mm.
as much as I can keep going, I will. In between bouts of, injuring my knee, which I've got an injured knee at the moment, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's why I wear something on it at the moment. But it won't stop me going. It might preclude me doing some things that I might have done before. So very important. I think keeping sound mind and body, I think, is as important as you possibly can.
Mm, mm, brilliant. Yeah, that's really helpful. You mentioned in your other answer as well that sectors like engineering and STEM are fairly male dominated. I'm sure there's hundreds of pieces of advice that you could give as a guy how you can support women in the workplace. What's probably let's do the 80/20 on it. What's the one piece of advice that you think would give the most benefit for a guy to help out and support his co-workers that are female?
Yeah. So we got two issues as I see it. We've got one of getting more women into the workplace right at the beginning. And the second issue is, which possibly is even more difficult, is keeping them there. There's been lots of work over the years done to try and get more women and others from underrepresented groups into companies. And I can say, for example, from a Nottingham perspective, when I graduated, we had 100 students in the whole department, one female. She got a job all right, but that's pretty low representation.
Yeah.
Now we've got 800 students in the department, in our department, about a third women,
Oh wow.
and quite a lot actually from what I would call international backgrounds,
Mm,
backgrounds that we would never have seen 40 years ago. So, and by the way, those women get jobs. They get jobs. So I'm seeing more women going into those professions, but we obviously need to do more to attract women into engineering, tech, whatever, so we can increase the pipeline and also others who would not have thought about going into it. So there's a piece we need to do there. And then the other piece, of course, is helping them to stay. So I think the key thing that we can do probably as men is mentoring, which
mm,
is what I spend a lot of my time doing, is mentoring more women, both to consider going into the industry, but also to support them in their careers.
mm,
Not only that, Ben, but they often say women tend to be over mentored and under sponsored. So that's the other piece of the things that I do, is sponsoring women in their careers, whether that's actually working in a company and supporting them that are clearly high flyers that should be moving up, or it's helping them through my mentoring and sponsorship. I'm going to give you an example. I ran a mentoring and sponsoring workshop at a Women in Energy conference, Society of Petroleum Engineers, a few weeks ago. So it was all women there, and we talked about what issues do you face, and one mentioned one that comes up quite often. She said, "Well, I think I'm doing a great job in my work because my manager says I'm doing a great job, and I get great marks in my performance review." But when I say to him, what are the chances of promotional opportunities? He just says, be patient. But she says, what I've noticed is that the men who I work with, who I reckon may not even be working as hard as me, but certainly no harder, seem to be
mm,
moving into higher jobs.
mm,
She says, what am I doing wrong? Or what am I not doing? I said, well, actually, if you sit back, you can probably guess what you're not doing. You're not networking. So what she was doing was a great job, and believing that doing a great job gets you a move in the company. It doesn't, not necessarily. You need to showcase more. And in fact, what the men were doing was maybe not working quite as hard, but doing enough,
mm,
still being good, but spending the rest of their time networking with other people of influence.
mm,
So that is an important thing for me. And I've come across that quite a lot. Oh, doing a great job is good, but if nobody knows about it apart from your
yeah.
line manager, then it's not going to get you anywhere. So that's the world we live in. I mean, I wish it was different, but it's not.
Mm,
So that's the thing I would say, that the big thing that we can do is mentoring and sponsorship to both get more women to come into the industry, but also to stay and develop their careers in the industry. Because it's not, a lot of people think a lot of women leave, it's because of children, but actually that's not the key reason. The key reason is culture.
mm,
It's the it's what they find as they move up in their careers, that they're not being supported, and that's the career breaker. And not enough, often men, not totally, but often men in leadership roles are not supporting these women moving forward. So
mm,
I think that's the main, that's probably the 80% that I would
yeah.
do to
Yeah.
address the issue. And that's why I spend a lot of time doing it.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, that leads us lovely into our next question, which is how do you see leadership?
Um, right. So leaders come in all shapes and sizes. So if I said, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Keir Starmer, etc. You
Mm.
see quite a wide range of differing leadership skills. Some of them you may prefer more than others. I certainly probably do. So my view on leadership is, and I'm not saying I'm brilliant at it. I quite like what they call servant leadership. Basically, that for me, that is about the leader who cares more about their team and their needs and career development than they do about themselves.
Mm.
And that's the one. If anybody says to me, what would be your ideal servant leadership, ideal leadership, it would be that. And that's what I try and do, not brilliantly in everything I'm involved in. Um, as an example, a very good servant leader might be the conductor of an orchestra,
Mm.
right? So the conductor is there to bring the best out of their people, but they only bring the best out of their people if they know their people, know what they're good at, and they can draw the strengths out of
Mm.
them. And okay, the conductor gets the round of applause at the end, but the reality is, if it hadn't have been for the team and their development and understanding them very well and their strengths, they would never have achieved what they achieve. So I'm a great believer in that. I think the old style, and I've seen it a lot in industry, certainly my early career, the sort of right, I'm the boss, you do what I tell you to do, and anything, and talk to me all the time about what you're doing, and I micromanage you and all this sort of thing. I think that hasn't gone, but it's still
Mm.
around. It's still around. The other thing I'd say about leadership, it's not necessarily about position,
Mm.
job title. It's about your ability to influence. So, just to give you another example of leadership, something I tell my students when they go to an assessment center, they often have to do some sort of team activity, right? And in that team activity, there might be six of them. Some will be very extrovert, loud, some will be introvert, quiet, and some will be in the middle. And I often tell them, look, companies look for great team players, but leaders. And by the way, leader isn't being the loud, shouty. Leader is the greatest influence. So I often say to them, find a role within that team activity, which could be even as simple as time manager,
Mm.
that you will always be involved in, that they can see that you're involved in it, and then you will always be involved because let's say you agree 10 minutes to brainstorm, da 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 da. You can sort of say, well, actually, 8 minutes have gone now on the brainstorming. We've got 2 minutes. You're always involved. The
Mm.
second thing I tell them to do in those assessment centers is the introvert, quiet ones have the right answer, but they can't get in a word in edgeways. So bring them in to the
Mm.
conversation. John, you've heard what some of the things that we've brought up. What do you feel based on what you've heard? So bring in the quiet and the loud ones. Great point, Jeff, but let's see what the rest of the team thinks. Type. That's influence.
Mm.
And actually, when I think about my career, Ben, clearly I've worked for some great leaders and some bad leaders, but mostly great leaders. But actually, a lot of the people who've shown leadership have been people very often either reporting to me or even levels lower
Mm.
because they have shown an influence in the organization that I have valued greatly, and
Mm.
their influence has far outweighed their job title.
Mm. Got you. So I guess the when it is the position, it's building the people and the people build the company.
Correct.
Like it's top down and bottom up. And
Yes.
then it's also you've got the influence from the other side where you can be a leader from bottom up as well. So it's
Yes.
yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it, and I'm going to use that. So I'm going to steal that. Thank you.
No problem.
So, so I guess influence kind of comes into this a little bit. But if you were to sit down with a box of skills and character traits, and you were going to build the perfect career from scratch today, where would you start? What traits and skills would you want in that graduate, and why?
Okay. So It's interesting. There is no perfect career, right? There was no perfect career because there's no perfection is very hard to achieve anyway. And the other thing I would say about the perfect career is it's often perfect inverted commas. It's often on the back of failures. So
Mm,
if I said to you, Ben, right, the perfect career, what I'd like you to do now is to pick a job and fail in it, and you will learn so much from that that you'll be able to use in the next role. Because I think you
mm,
learn more from failures than successes. Right? Successes, everything's going great, you're winning awards, this, that, and the other sounds brilliant, but actually it's the failures you learn even more from. So very hard for me to say to you, right, let's build failures into this perfect career, but
yeah.
don't be frightened of failures. I suppose that's what I'm saying. Um, so I think there's a number of skills and traits you need for a career, not in order of importance. I mean, I've talked about networking already, but I think communication is
Mm,
absolutely key. Your ability to communicate is so important. And not only that, probably the most important part of it, as people often say, is listening. The more you listen, the more you understand the situation, the more you're able to give a great answer. And actually, by listening to people, very often you find the more receptive of you themselves because actually you're prepared to listen to them, understand their needs and concerns, and then able to support them. So I think the relationship development is absolutely key. And if I could build in a some sort of um, trait or skill into somebody's skills box, I would say the ability to communicate empathetically with people, I would put very high, because we're all different, um, and we all need people to spend time with us, and rather not sort of dismiss us in a very quick response or this, that, and the other. Very often, sometimes you find people are so quick to move on that they're sort of they're not actually listening to your answer, but they've moved on to the next question. It's almost like they've got these 10 questions I need to get through. Um, to find out about you and this, that, and the other. And actually, I'm not interested in your answer. Actually, I want to go on to the next question because I need to finish those. So I think it's all about spending time with people. It's empathetic
mm,
conversations, communication, listening, I think is important. I think the ability to network is very important. Lots of people think that that is you need to be extrovert. You don't need to be extrovert. In fact, introverts probably arguably make better networkers because of that listening bit.
mm.
If you network with somebody at a conference, the last thing they want is you to be speaking to them all the time. They'd rather you, what you said a bit earlier, they'd rather the 80-20 rule. In fact, that's the rule I try and apply, and I'm very bad at it, which is you speak 80% of the time. So in a mentoring relationship, I would want you to speak 80% of the time and I speak 20%. Doesn't always work out. Some people like you to be a bit more directive with them and this, that, and the other. But anyway, so I think that's an important factor. Um, what else would I say is important? I think it's important probably to work in understand different work environments, different cultures in different types of organizations. In an ideal world, if you could get some idea of working in a corporate and some idea working in a small startup, small mid-size, that might be very interesting as part of your career to help you decide what you might want to do in the future. I started with corporates. I spent a lot of my career in corporates, which I really enjoyed. Maybe if I'd have spent a bit more time in startups, I might have had a slightly different career, which might have been better. But, I can't go back. I'd had the opportunity now to do a few different things, so maybe I can do that now. But I think having the ability in those early careers to understand how different organizations work, and actually that might even decide you to set up your own business, which a lot of younger people now are doing more so than my peers would have done. I was at a school giving some practice interviews at a school in my one of my schools in my trust that I'm involved in, and I was talking to a 14-year-old boy. We talked about careers, I said, what are you interested in doing? He says, oh, I want to continue with my startup that I
Oh,
set going about a year or two ago. I said, oh, what's that in? He likes mountain biking. He actually sells mountain bike gear. And what he does is he imports it
wow.
uh, from Asia, a lot of it, and
Yeah,
he sells
yeah.
it on.
Wow.
And he's doing that at 14, and he's already making money. Um,
It's
and he'd
amazing.
like to continue with that. Well, that's fair enough. You see, I would never have thought about anything like that. I would
Uh,
always thought, I got to join a corporate, and
mm,
that's how I'm going to develop my career. So everyone's different. So I think you need to find out in those early years what might make sense for you, and it might be something that might surprise you. But if you don't try, then
mm,
you'll never know. And
yeah.
that's probably another piece of the perfect career, if you like, is through that networking, you will develop relationships with lots of people, and sometimes they will come up with opportunities you'd never thought about. And I might actually say to you, unless it's something you're absolutely not interested in, give it a go
Mm,
because you might actually learn so much from it. Whether you stay there or not, almost doesn't matter. It's a case of it's brought you something else as part of it's helped you in this area. It's
mm,
supported you in this. It's brought you contacts here. It's brought you contacts there. Those things can bring a lot of things which can be useful to use later on. I mean, I was only realizing when I did my portfolio that a lot of the stuff I did when I was in my corporate role, managing lots of people, what I really enjoyed was mentoring
mm,
my team members, and that's what I use now. But if it hadn't have been for my career working in different countries, different cultures, mentoring team members, I'd never be doing what I do now. So everything you do, I think, and not understanding at the time influences what you do later on. So the
mm.
more you do in those early years, the better.
Yeah, yeah. So it's almost a case of trying to fail fast and
Yes,
get those feedback loops so that you can figure out what you want to do and then spend as much time doing that as you can, really. Um,
I think that's right.
yeah, yeah. And there's a concept that I love. I think it's from Charlie Munger. If you heard of Charlie Munger, the Warren Buffett's best friend, they
Oh,
built
right, the
Berkshire
Warren
Hathaway
Buffett.
together. Yeah, yeah. And he uses an idea of inverted thinking. And it's almost saying, okay, what would I have to do to fail as quickly as I can at this? And then just avoid doing that. And if you can figure out what you don't want to do, that's almost a quicker way of finding out what you do want to do. So it's
That's
that's a
good.
really yeah, I really like that. So that's a fun way of doing that. And then the other side of it you were saying was communication and networking, which is they've been labeled as almost soft skills, but the more people that I speak to, they seem very fundamental and very, very important. And it was interesting to me that you didn't even mention maths or technical ability. It was all these skills that people seem to put on the back burner and say, I'll get better at communicating later on.
Well,
But it seems,
interestingly, they use that terminology, soft skills. I don't like that terminology. I like to
no,
call it people skills. And you're
yeah,
right. I didn't mention anything technical uh, because actually you can do engineering now without maths. I mean, in my day, you had to do maths, physics, chemistry to do chemical engineering. Now you can do maths and chemistry, but even then, there are universities now where they're not even asking for maths at A level. They're
oh
they
wow,
they actually want you to come in with other aspects. We talk about left side of the brain and right side of the brain. So
okay,
there are universities now. They'll give you how much maths they think you need when you get there, but they're quite happy for you to come in with artistic skills
oh wow,
and bring and actually, who's to say that's not a bad thing? Because they work with industry, they work on projects, project management. You don't need to be a skilled engineer to be a great project manager, for example.
yeah, yeah,
It's about working with people. If you look at any job, it's about people. Pretty well any job that you do, even if it looks like it's a single thing that you're doing, there's still people involved in some aspect or other. So I think the people
mm,
skills are absolutely key. And by the
brilliant.
way, I did like maths at school and
I did as well.
university. So it was my favorite subject, funnily enough.
Yeah.
But it's not, I would not put it as a key area to develop your career. I think it's all about people skills.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you. So I'll leave you with one last question now, and then we'll bring it into land. So, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Well, I could say networking, couldn't I?
You could do,
Networking. I
yeah.
could say networking, but I'll tell you what, one of the best pieces of advice, probably the one of my greatest mentors in industry, who later became somebody who had sponsored me actually. He said to me, Vince, there are two types of people around. Those who see a problem to every solution, and those who see a solution to every problem. Make sure that you're the second. That is the most important thing I've ever heard because actually, I mean, there's obviously networking and all these other things, but the reality is people who see solutions to every problem are going to be positive, optimistic, we can do it type people. The first type of people, possibly the problem to every solution, are going to be the pessimistic, negative, we can't do it. I've always been a we can do it person, and that's the best piece of advice one of the best pieces of advice I ever had. And I've try, hopefully most of the time, but not always, to be a solution to a problem. If I'm sitting down with someone, I'm mentoring them, oh, I've got a problem, there's a solution. Let's work on the solution. There's always a solution to every problem. I have never known a problem that I've been involved in where there hasn't been a solution. That solution, by the way, could be walk away.
Mm,
The
mm,
atmosphere here is bad, toxic. I've got a terrible line manager. How can we make it work? Blah blah blah. Well, maybe the solution is walk away.
mm.
So yeah, that is. If I had to pick one off the top of my head, that will probably be it, Ben.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much, Vince. I think we'll call it there. Thank you so much for that. I learned a huge amount. I encourage everyone to go follow Vince on LinkedIn. It's a great source of inspiration, but also information as well. So, is there anything else you'd like to add at the end, Vince?
No, that's fine. Thank you for having me, Ben, and look forward to keeping in touch.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Vince. I will have to follow up in 6 to 9 months.
Great. Yes,
Brilliant.
absolutely. All the
Yeah.
best.
Networking. All the best. Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye.